This being the Pokot people's way of life, including their mode of dressing, predisposes them to Kala-Azar, and therein lies the key to preventing bites from the sandfly.
Jinsi ya kuzuia na kwa sahi community hawaelewi namna ya kuzuia, lakini tumejaribu kufunza kabisa kwamba number 1 unafaa t-shirt yenye iko na long sleeve, alafu unafaa trousers masaa ya jioni. Lakini most of our people hawana hiyo t-shirts, wanafaa tu shuka. So ukiwaona wanafaa shuka, so kuafford hiyo t-shirt na trousers hawawezi. Ya pili, hawana neti. Na tumejaribu kama mobilizer, tumejaribu kufunza kabisa ili wawe na neti na walale ndani ya neti. Lakini most of them hawalali, ndio huwa wanaumwa na hizo sandflies. Tukiwa na mpango ya kutembea nje, huwa tunafunza kwamba kama uko na karibu na hizo handhills, unazibomoa karibu na kwako. Alafu unafanya bush clearing kwa boma ili iwe mbali na hiyo msituni. Sababu hiyo ndio mali hiyo sandflies inapatikana.
At Kacheliba Sub-County Hospital, one would be forgiven to think that the many young girls seen here are pregnant or that the children are suffering from kwashiorkor. Solomon Tukei, a clinician, is the medical superintendent at the hospital. He says that they diagnose between 5 and 20 patients in a month with Kala-Azar, depending on the season. They are taken care of in this dedicated Kala-Azar treatment center.
And most of these patients do come from Baringo, that is East Pokot. They do come from Central Pokot in West Pokot County. Some also come from this sub-county, that's North Pokot. And even far as Uganda, we also get patients from Uganda and Turkana County. But a high number of these patients do come from Central Pokot and Baringo. But of recent, we have received patients from parts which we didn't expect Kala-Azar to be found within the north, like the areas like Katuberot, Kasai, Kauriong. Those are new areas now we have got Kala-Azar cases. Normally it is peak with us from August to October and even November. Those are the months that we get a high number of Kala-Azar patients.
Why is that the case?
I haven't taken a lot of research, but it seems that's when the sandfly is so much available, and that's also the bites is so high. And by that time, that's a rainy season, which means now the place is bushy. There's a lot of cracks in the backs of trees, and where these people at times go and lie in the rivers, and especially at night. When these people go for plays at night, that's when the bites can take place.
Dr. Monique Wasuna is a physician who has done extensive work and clinical research around leishmaniasis. As the director, DNDi Africa, she explains why Kala-Azar can be fatal if not treated.
Infection goes into the bloodstream, goes into the blood-making organs, like the liver, the spleen, the bone marrow, and this makes the person ill. You start to have fever and headache, and with time the organs start swelling, and because there's crowding in those organs, like in the bone marrow, there's specific cells that are infected, called the macrophages. And they go in there, and then they multiply and burst, and then they infect new macrophages. So with time, there's crowding in the bone marrow, in those spleen, and the organs enlarge, the spleen and liver can enlarge. Bone marrow, therefore, it interferes with the blood-making function of these organs. And so the person starts to have less blood, what we call anemia. And so when you have less blood, then you have serious problems, because then you start having heart problems, your legs swell, you go a short distance and you can't breathe and so on. So this infection then, the only way is to make a diagnosis and to treat it. So you have to be in a hospital and they have to do a bone marrow aspirate or a splenic aspirate, look it in under microscope in the lab, and be able to identify these organisms, and then you have to have treated. Cutaneous leishmaniasis is a skin condition, yeah? And it's an ulcer that forms in the skin after you've been infected. And it's very difficult also to treat. It's very, very neglected, more than even the visceral leishmaniasis. Because as we speak now, there's no treatment for cutaneous leishmaniasis. So what happens is that if you have an ulcer from an infection in your skin that caused by leishmania parasite, you now have to, if it is on the hand, some people just ignore it, yeah, because it doesn't cause you any so much pain. It's an ulcer that is there, painful at times. If it's infected, it's more painful. You just go on with your duties. It only becomes a problem if the ulcer is on the face. Then as a woman, you want to be pretty, there's this, big thing on the face, so you have to seek medical attention. So most of the cases go unnoticed, because it can be in your backside, can be in your thigh, covered by the dress, can be in the hand, people walk along, so you don't see that but it is there.
Getting to diagnose Kala-Azar is not often an easy task for the clinicians here, because the disease in its early stages mimics other diseases like malaria, typhoid, or brucellosis, diseases that Tukey says they have to rule out fast unless one comes from one of the Kala-Azar endemic areas of West Pokot County.
We have already set a logarithm whereby if a patient comes from suspected area, he or she presents with those cardinal signs and symptoms, that's when we can raise our suspicion index that this patient, there's need for us to screen for Kala-Azar. So we normally take the history, and mostly this patient presents with fever. That is progressive fever that lasts for 1 week, more than 1 week. You find that the patient is wasted. And also when you do palpation, you find that there is enlargement of the liver and the spleen and weight loss. Those are the symptoms and signs that can give you, to be suggestive that this patient could be having leishmaniasis. And by having that, that's when we can send this patient to the lab. And the first investigation tool we normally do is dipstick. That is leishmaniasis. We send it for rabbit test RK39. We send to the lab. And upon the lab, then if the lab person, technologist, gets that the patient is positive, then it sends to us. And if his patient is suspect there is a mastigos or promastigos in the blood, then he can go to a next test, that is direct agglutination test, we call that. And that one, patient is requested to wait for 1 week, because this titer you cannot do by one patient, you have to wait until the number reaches 8 to 10. So that's when now you can do the titer. And if the patient which the spleen aspirate was suggestive, but it was not clear from the first test, that is dipstick, then the titer will show. The third investigative stage, that is spleen aspirate, where we have to do spleen aspirate for the patient, or we do bone marrow aspirate. All these are parameters to investigate the mastigos if the patient has already turned infected after the sandfly bite.
But going to somebody's spleen with a needle and a syringe and suck up some splenic tissue, this is a very invasive procedure, and somebody could actually die. So it's not recommended that it's done anywhere. It has to be done in safe hands and in a hospital setting, so that if that person bleeds in the spleen, and as you know, it becomes a medical emergency. So if that person bleeds in the spleen, it's a medical emergency, you have to dash them to theater and possibly remove the spleen. You will try conservative management, give IV fluids, give blood, but possibly remove the spleen.
It is critical that the Kala-Azar is confirmed before treatment is started because of the nature of medicines used. Sodium stibogluconate, commonly referred to as SSG, and paramomycin, an antibiotic, are the first-line treatment.
MSF working in the field realized that when they combine the two treatments, SSG and paramomycin an antibiotic, which has been repurposed to treat VL, so they found that combine those two for a shorter duration of 17 days, it works. So as DNDI was created in 2003, we started to take up that observation from MSF and put it in a proper phase 3 clinical trial. And that means we are taking the combination of SSG and paramomycin for 17 days and comparing it with a standard treatment, which is SSG alone for 30 days. All these drugs are injectables. So you have a choice of injection for 30 days or injections for combination for 17 days, but you know there are two treatments. So it was a big trial which we did in Leishmaniasis East Africa platform LEAP sites in Sudan, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Kenya. And over 1,300 or so patients were involved in that trial. And we were able to show that the combination of SSG and paramomycin is as good as SSG alone for 30 days. And remember, SSG has got toxic side effects. So the combination of the two would reduce the toxicity a bit, and also the hospital stay will be reduced, and the patients really preferred it. So in 2010, WHO, we presented our data, and WHO actually accepted this data and recommended that this treatment, SSG and paramomycin combination, be for 17 days, should be the first-line treatment for visceral leishmaniasis within the Eastern Africa region. So that was an achievement for us. At least we added another treatment option for these patients that were neglected, but it's not good enough because you're still injecting people. So now we moved from there, and we had investigated a drug called meltifosine, which is an oral compound. And the drawback for meltifosine is that it's teratogenic. So you don't use it in childbearing age females, and that's the drawback. But otherwise, it's oral. So what we've done is to combine this meltifosine with paramomycin, an injection, because at least the toxic effects are not as much as in SSG. And so we are doing that phase 3 clinical trial now. We will be able to tell you the results maybe next time we meet.
I believe that the researchers will come with the shortest period, because I believe that even for us to reach 17 days, a research was done. And that's why this new treatment was introduced. That is SSG, sodium stibogluconate, and paramomycin. Because I remember the first time we used to give only pendostam, and it used to take 60 days for patient to be declared cured. But for now, it takes 17 days for patient to be cured and discharged home. So there's a lot of improvement, and I believe time will reach when a patient can take drugs for 3 days or 1 week and it comes cured from leishmaniasis.
Over 70 years, 80 years now, there has been very little R&D, research and development in this area. And so there have been no new treatments that have come into the market to treat these patients that have this disease. And because these patients are very poor, service leishmaniasis occurs in very, very poor communities. So because you're poor and you don't have money to buy treatment, so no treatments are being made because you can't afford to buy. So that's why they're neglected in terms of poverty, in terms of research and development, in terms of availability of treatment options. So that's how our organization, DNDI, was created, to try to find treatment options for these people who are suffering from the neglected diseases such as visceral leishmaniasis.
Matibabu ni kali, sababu ni injection tu, na kuna sahi tuko introduce research, na hiyo research tuko tunajaribu kureduce ile injections, sababu mwanzo tulikuwa tunadunga 60 injection, lakini sahi tunaweka 34 na tuko nazo na tunazo za kumeza. So hiyo ndio inafanya ile uchungu iende chini kiasi.
What the idea has done is that we, in the last 15 years, we've been developing drugs from scratch. And now we have in the pipeline like four oral treatments for leishmaniasis that are going to go into phase 1 clinical trials. I think some already have gone into phase 1. So the idea would be then to get either give this as one treatment, yeah, a single dose, like 2 tablets, and you're done with Kala-Azar. That's the idea. But if we don't get there, we will also try to combine, because we need to protect the drugs from resistance. So we may combine these 2 oral drugs and maybe give it for 7 days. The treatment should not go beyond 7 days. That's our dream. Single tablets or 2 tablets at a go, single dosing, or maximum combination for 7 days.
After the 17-day course of treatment with the current medicines, confirmation has to be done that one is clear of the parasites and that the spleen is no longer palpable in the abdomen.
After the treatment, before the patient be discharged, the patient has to be evaluated. You ask the same first history, and the patient will give you that there is no more fever. And you also find, when you do palpation, the spleen tend to have reduced to sizable amount. Because normally when the patient comes, the spleen becomes large, the liver is enlarged. But now after curage, you will see that the spleen and the liver tend to have reduced even to untouchable size.
It is estimated that 1 billion people are at risk of leishmaniasis. Kenya is among 7 countries where new cases of Kala-Azar occur. The others are Brazil, Ethiopia, India, Somalia, South Sudan, and Sudan. Every year, 50 to 90,000 new cases occur. Because people affected by Kala-Azar are really poor, getting access to diagnosis and treatment is an uphill task that requires input from the various stakeholders.
Access is the next big thing that, as DNDI, we also want to partner with the Ministry of Health in terms of access, because here we are trying to produce treatments for leishmaniasis, and we are not sure whether the patients, like if you look at the guidelines for Kenya now, the recommended treatment is SSG plus paromomycin for 17 days. But we ask ourselves, are people really getting these medicines? What is on the ground? So we are partnering with the NTD group and the Ministry of Health to just see what can be done.
The ideal treatment for all infected by Kala-Azar would be a safe oral medicine that is effective and low cost.
Kala-Azar, as we call it, is a deadly disease. It's a neglected disease, but it should not be a death sentence. Yeah, there is treatment available, and if we have had cases where some patients probably go to Kenyatta and they don't have medicine, they call us, and we are quite willing to help. Yeah, where there's a need, because we just don't do research and leave the other patients who have the disease that don't fit into the research. So we treat everyone. So go to a hospital, and if the diagnosis is made, if it's difficult, we DNDi can help.
While significant steps have been made in the management of Kala-Azar, a lot more remains to be done to make diagnosis and treatment better for those living in Leishmania endemic areas and are likely to be affected by Kala-Azar. Dr. Masi Korir, KTN News from Kachiliba, West Pokot County.